We're going to be talking about things over the next 3 weeks that I think will be amazing for our country, amazing for our jobs, and will bring us to a new level of prosperity.
The U.S. is set to lose $12.5 billion because of it. Traveler spending here is already down 22.5%. That's from last year.
Look, barely anyone on board.
There was nobody there. There was nobody in my row. It was really shocking. I've never been on a flight like that.
America's airports, the very front doors of the nation, are no longer bustling crossroads but ghost towns. Between 2023 and 2025, international traffic has collapsed by 60 to 80%, leaving departure halls eerily empty and immigration counters idle. As U.S. gateways crumble, a new network of global hubs has taken their place. 11 rising centers in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East have claimed the routes once dominated by America, while airlines like Emirates, Lufthansa, and Singapore Airlines have rerouted their business away from U.S. soil. The World Travel and Tourism Council now estimates that America will lose at least $12.5 billion in international tourism this year, but behind the numbers lies a deeper question. How did the world's leading aviation power lose its grip so quickly, and can it ever reclaim its role as the planet's central hub? Before we dive in, tap that like button. It tells YouTube, this content matters, and nowhere is this collapse more visible than at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. Once the undisputed gate number 1 of America, JFK, has become the most dramatic symbol of decline. International arrivals have plunged by 78%, the sharpest drop in U.S. aviation history, leaving once crowded terminals silent. The airlines that once defined JFK's prestige are leaving too. Emirates has cut nearly 60% of its flights, while British Airways has quietly scrapped multiple London routes, forcing passengers to connect through European hubs instead. Even the cargo giants that fed the city's economy are pulling back. FedEx and DHL have shifted their sorting operations to other global gateways, leaving New York sidelined. Walk through JFK's international terminal today, and the emptiness is impossible to ignore. Check-in counters stand idle, security lines have vanished, and immigration booths sit unmanned. What was once the beating heart of transatlantic travel now feels more like a relic than a hub. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It's how we keep uncovering what others won't say. If JFK illustrates the collapse on the East Coast, Los Angeles International shows how far the West has fallen. Once a glittering gateway tied to Hollywood's global pull, LAX can no longer hold the world's attention. International traffic has dropped by 71%, with the steepest declines coming from Asia, the very market that once sustained California's tourism boom. The airlines are voting with their feet. Singapore Airlines has reduced flights by 40%, while Cathay Pacific has eliminated multiple routes altogether, redirecting passengers through Vancouver, Tokyo, and Seoul. For cargo operators, the story is just as bleak. Tightened security and mounting delays have driven freight carriers to abandon LAX in favor of more reliable ports across the Pacific. What makes the decline especially striking is that Los Angeles was more than an airport. It was a cultural showcase. Every arrival carried the image of America's soft power tied to film technology and lifestyle. Today, that image has cracked. The entertainment capital of the world is losing its credibility, not only on screen, but in the skies above it. Further north, the story turns from disappointment to abandonment. Portland International Airport, once celebrated as America's green and traveler-friendly hub, now stands half-empty. International arrivals have collapsed by 73%, and entire gates have been shuttered permanently, a stark reminder of how quickly prestige can evaporate. Airlines that once gave Portland a place on the world map have quietly walked away. Lufthansa, British Airways, and SAS now route their traffic through Vancouver just across the Canadian border, leaving Portland bypassed in favor of more stable connections. For passengers, the shift has been devastating. Inquiries from overseas travelers have dropped by 81%, driven largely by concerns over safety and reliability. Cargo hasn't stayed behind either. Freight that once passed through Portland now flows into Seattle and Vancouver, transforming what was once a regional showcase into an afterthought. The result is isolation, an airport that once symbolized innovation and accessibility, now reduced to watching its neighbors absorb the traffic it lost. If Portland has faded into irrelevance, Newark has spiraled into disorder. Once marketed as a convenient alternative to JFK, it has become a nightmare for international travelers. Since 2022, passenger numbers have dropped by 68%, a collapse that reflects not just lost routes, but a reputation in free fall. The carriers that once anchored Newark are disappearing. Emirates has cut its schedule in half, while Virgin Atlantic and Swiss have exited entirely, shifting their fleets to airports with stronger global credibility. What remains for passengers is a grueling experience. Security lines stretching beyond 2 hours and immigration procedures mired in bureaucracy, turning even short layovers into ordeals. In the global hierarchy of airports, Newark has slipped dramatically. Once considered part of America's competitive edge, it now lags far behind rivals like Dubai, Singapore, and even Toronto, which are seizing the very traffic flows Newark has lost. For international flyers, the choice is simple: avoid New Jersey's chaos and look elsewhere. From chaos in the Northeast to collapse in the South, Miami tells another painful story. Long celebrated as the bridge between Latin America and the United States, the city's lifeline has fractured in ways never seen before. Passenger arrivals from Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia have plummeted by 64%, severing connections that once fueled both tourism and business. The causes run deeper than airline scheduling. U.S. visa processing times for Latin American travelers have stretched beyond 6 months, effectively shutting the door on millions of potential visitors. Frustrated airlines are scaling back. LATAM has cut nearly a third of its Miami routes, while Aviana has canceled entire connections, redirecting passengers through Bogotá, Sao Paulo, or Madrid instead. The fallout reaches far beyond the airport. Hotels that once thrived on steady waves of South American guests are now struggling. Luxury names in Bal Harbour and Aventura are reporting occupancy rates below 40%, an unthinkable number for a city that once marketed itself as the capital of the Americas. What was once a thriving gateway now feels like a closed corridor. If Miami shows the collapse of leisure travel, Boston highlights an even deeper wound: the loss of intellectual and cultural traffic. Logan Airport, once the proud gateway to America's academic capital, has seen international arrivals from the United Kingdom, Germany, and Canada fall by 59%. For a city whose lifeblood depends on global students, researchers, and cultural exchange, the impact is nothing short of profound. The delays in student visas have only worsened the damage. With processing times stretching endlessly, thousands of young people who once dreamed of Harvard or MIT are now choosing Canada, the UK, or continental Europe instead. This shift is not only draining tuition dollars but also reshaping Boston's reputation as a magnet for innovation. Each student diverted elsewhere represents lost potential in research labs, startup incubators, and the cultural diversity that gave Boston its vibrancy. Airlines have responded in kind to the shrinking demand. Aer Lingus has cut 40% of its Dublin routes, severing a historic link between Boston and Ireland's academic exchange, while Air France has abandoned its Paris connection altogether, removing one of the city's key cultural bridges to Europe. The symbolism of these cuts is clear. The academic and cultural artery that once flowed so freely is now narrowing by the month, and the consequences extend far beyond the campus gates. Boston's hotel sector, particularly in Cambridge and Back Bay, is struggling with occupancy rates below 50%, an unthinkable figure for neighborhoods that once thrived on visiting scholars, international conferences, and academic tourism. Restaurants, bookstores, and cultural venues tied to student life are reporting unprecedented downturns, deepening the sense of erosion. The city that once prided itself on shaping the world's future minds now finds itself watching those same minds land elsewhere. The decline of Logan is not simply about fewer flights, it is about Boston losing the global intellectual ecosystem that defined its identity. Without international arrivals, the city risks becoming inward-looking, less of a crossroads of ideas and more of an isolated academic outpost. If Boston's fall represents the erosion of America's academic pole, Seattle reflects the weakening of its Pacific Bridge. Once a vital link between the U.S. and Asia, Seattle-Tacoma International stood as a hub where commerce, culture, and technology converged. But between 2023 and 2025, that role has unraveled. International traffic has collapsed down 69% from Asia and 54% from Europe, turning a city once seen as forward-looking into an afterthought on the global map. The retreat of airlines underscores just how far Seattle has slipped. All Nippon Airways has canceled its Tokyo route, severing a connection that for decades symbolized the Pacific partnership between Japan and the U.S. British Airways has reduced its London presence, leaving travelers with fewer options to cross the Atlantic from the northwest. The symbolism is powerful. When flagship carriers pull out, it signals not just a business decision but a judgment on the reliability of the hub itself. The consequences ripple through the city. Hotels downtown are barely half full, with occupancy rates hovering around 45%. Convention organizers who once considered Seattle a natural meeting ground for Pacific Rim business are shifting their events to Vancouver or San Francisco. The result is a loss of both revenue and prestige as global visitors bypass the Emerald City entirely. What makes Seattle's decline even more striking is the shadow of Boeing. The aerospace giant headquartered in the region was long a source of confidence that the city's aviation ecosystem would remain strong. Yet Boeing's recent production delays, safety controversies, and strained relations with regulators have eroded trust in Seattle's aviation legacy. As the company struggles, so too does the city's international standing. This has created a dangerous feedback loop. A weakening airport amplifies the struggles of the local economy, while industrial setbacks reinforce the perception of Seattle as a city losing its edge. Once imagined as America's Pacific showcase, Seattle now faces the risk of being remembered instead as a missed opportunity in the era of shifting global travel. While U.S. airports fade into silence, rivals and neighbors are seizing the moment. Vancouver and Toronto have surged as the new North American gateways, attracting routes and passengers that once flowed effortlessly through New York, Los Angeles, or Miami. For Canadian travelers, the shift is just as symbolic as it is practical. Many now choose Dominica, Jamaica, or Mexico over Florida and Phoenix, reshaping patterns of leisure that once seemed unshakable. The evidence of this realignment is everywhere. In a single month, 500,000 fewer cars crossed the US-Canada border, reflecting a broader withdrawal from America's tourism economy. Globally, the shift is even more dramatic. Doha, Dubai, Singapore, and Istanbul are no longer challengers. They are now the beating hearts of global aviation, drawing the traffic trust and prestige the United States once commanded. And so, the question becomes unavoidable as America's doors close. Where does the world choose to walk instead? The fall of these airports is not just about empty terminals, it's about the erosion of America's role as a global hub. When the very gateways of a superpower become ghost towns, what does that say about the superpower itself? Thanks for watching, and if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click fuels the truth.